This is August 26, 2022. My lesson today is titled, You Do Not Know the Butler. You Do Not Know the Butler. This is the Alak Emmett channel on Twitter, YouTube, Patreon at this time. I'm setting up Odyssey and a couple other places, but it's going to take some more time. Anyway, I want to start out reading from the story of Joseph being in prison and meeting the butler and the baker. From Genesis chapter 40, I'll read a couple verses, about 4 verses here. Genesis 40 and verse 2, And Pharaoh was wroth against 2 of his officers, against the chief of the butlers, and against the chief of the bakers. In verse 3 it says they went into the prison with Joseph, and they were under the power of Joseph, basically in the prison, under his care. In verse 5, And they dreamed the dream, both of them, each man his dream, in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. The butler and the baker of the king of Egypt were bound in the prison. And we know the story, of course, that Joseph was stolen away, put in a pit, ended up in Egypt, eventually went to prison. See my will lessons on directed will, or the will of God, and you can understand a little bit more of what's going on in the life of Joseph here, and you can see even with your life that sometimes, no matter what the will of your Father is, what his plans are, and you have been well set up with a nice coach showing you favor and so on, you've already got a dream from God that luminaries are going to bow down to you. Even mother and father, you're going to be lifted up high. But then you can be rerouted into an unfortunate situation. Something can come and knock you right off the path where you were heading toward the fulfillment of all those very miraculous looking dreams that you had from God. And this is happening in the life of Joseph. Verse 21 and 23, let's run down there. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. Of course, most of us would know the story. Joseph told them what the dream meant, and it went according to how he said it. 23, now he hung the baker in verse 22. But 23, Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. I can just imagine that Joseph was looking for the butler to say something, since something good happened to him and Joseph was involved in it. He was thinking that maybe some assistance can come to him, because maybe the Pharaoh did not get to hear his side of the story properly of what went on. So maybe this man can say, this is a righteous man down there, and he told me his part of the story in detail, and this is what really happened. And he does not belong down there in the prison. But it did not happen like that. Now, after time, the Pharaoh had his dream as well. So notice that while Joseph was in trouble, he didn't stop his efforts, his work, his gift. He didn't stop flowing in what his life was really about. He continued. He didn't say, I'm too sad, things are not going well, I'm just going to stop, I'll disappear, nobody will see or hear from me for a couple of years and whatever. Only when God does something nice for me will I do whatever is within me to do. He didn't do that. He continued to do what was in his heart, and the butler was restored as he said. That was certainly a help for him, a help for the butler. And then the Pharaoh got his own dream. There was trouble finding the meaning of it. But then in chapter 41 in verse 9, it says, Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. And he began to tell how he got an interpretation to his dream down in the prison from Joseph. So he remembered his fault, his shortcoming, which is telling you that he knew inside of him that he should have spoken a word for Joseph. So he called it a fault, an error, a shortcoming. And so it is that sometimes in our lives, some people can do things, make certain moves that will make your life a little easier or pull you out of a bad situation, but they, for one reason or another, just don't do it. They don't care enough, they're just selfish, or they throw themselves into whatever they're busy with and you get left behind. But God's always got a way to bring back the one who he really wants to restore. So the butler served a cup to the Pharaoh to drink, and he served that cup once again. The butler in the story, unlike the baker, is the one in the scripture who deals with what flows, because he's giving the Pharaoh a drink, it says. He deals with what flows. He was the one through whom change flowed into Joseph's life. So what Joseph did caused goodness and relief to flow into the life of the Pharaoh, because his favorite butler, his chief butler, was restored unto him. And this work that Joseph did caused a flow to happen in Joseph's life as well. It was not by mistake. It was not by mistake that Joseph was faced with this butler in the prison. Never underestimate what is around you and who is in your life. The little job you have or the unfair treatment you receive from others who are guilty before God and others for treating you in a faulty or sinful way can still hold your blessing. Like they say, don't burn bridges. Joseph just had to leave the matter to God, even though he helped to have goodness flow in the butler's life, but the butler did not help, at least immediately, to have some goodness flow back into Joseph's life. When people do things that work against you, sometimes you just got to leave them to God, especially when you're in a situation where you can't do anything about it anyway. The story teaches that an unfair treatment that holds you back even longer can still cause something new and different to flow into your life. Does not matter where you are in this life, what your situation is. You do not know just how changes will flow into your life. Would Joseph had thought that people in touch with the king, directly in touch with the king, and chief servants of the king would have come down to be with him in the prison? All the dignitaries that are around the Pharaoh Would Joseph had thought that they would have come down here? See, maybe Joseph might have been looking at his own gift to interpret dreams and be thinking that he will stand before the Pharaoh to pull it off himself. Or somehow the Pharaoh is going to just decide to walk through the prison to see how things are going and so on. But it didn't work out quite like that. Instead, there was some kind of a middleman, somebody else who was not the Pharaoh, but who were dignitaries. Those are the ones who came to be in touch with little Joseph. And God sent them. And He can send people and situations in your life that will act on the life of the other people or situations in your life that will bring about your change. Whatever is holding you back, it can be broken. And so we have to change our minds to thinking of the possibilities and not just be twisted up in fear and worry and doubt. If Joseph had continued to think about, oh, how woe is me, and not continue to sharpen his gift and spend time with the Most High there in relation to his gift, he would have not been ready and been in tune to do what was needed to be done at the time for someone else. Not do it for himself. He did it for someone else. If he was doing it for himself, he would not need to tack onto it, hey, remember me when you get restored, when you go back in the presence of the king. But because he was doing it from pure motive, just doing what the Spirit was doing in his life, just following his calling. See, sometimes pure motive is what's going to get you moving in the right direction when the right time comes, because time and chance happeneth to all. The chance you need is going to come at the right time if you remain locked up, rooted, and just right into your gift. Just embracing it fully, working on it, not letting it go. Do not limit your expectations or your hopefulness or the work that the Creator has placed in your life to do. Don't limit it for a moment. Joseph's work with his dream interpretation was not cast aside because he was sad about being in prison. His gift instead flowed out of him, and the connection to the Pharaoh flowed out of the butler back into Joseph's life. What you do, it's never for nothing. That's a song I remember from years ago. It's never for nothing. It's going to come back to you. You don't know when, but it's going to come back to you. Isaiah 49:4, Then I said, I have labored in vain. I have spent my strength for naught and in vain. Yet surely my judgment is with the Lord, and my work with my God. This is the way the people in the Bible thought. They thought that their judgment was with the Lord and their work with their God. They were wrapped up and tied up in the connection that they had with God and what they were supposed to do on this earth in the time that they have here. So just understand that as you busy yourself with what your life should be concerned about, someone can come around you inside your pit or your prison. This is not God on the Alok Emma channel, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon. And just remember, you do not know the butler and you do not know the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh and the butler, they are not in your circle. None of them live in your neighborhood or in your house necessarily. But you do not have to know the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh, the one who can change your life. You don't have to know the butler right now either. That can change your life. You do not have to know just how it's going to work out before it does. So if you don't know the butler, the person who can make the connection for you, and he doesn't live in your abode, understand that It can happen in your life as well as in the life of Joseph. Because Joseph wasn't talking to this butler every day while he was down there in the prison. But God puts the butler in the same prison house with Joseph, whose long ago dream showed that he, Joseph, was destined to rise. Life has a way of putting miracles right in your environment when you least expect it. Miracles that are otherwise outside your reach. Keep your trust in God. Keep it alive, even when you are in a pit or a prison of a situation. God can send someone down there, some possibility. Someone can come around long enough with some kind of a knowledge. You can be placed in a situation long enough that can change your view, that can change something in your life and lead you into some kind of change. That when you step into that situation or around that person, you can be around them long enough before they are moved out. Just long enough to pull you out, to show you a new way. Make sure possibility is in your language, is in your mind from day to day, because it can work out. No matter how bad the situation is, remember, it can certainly work out even if you do not know the butler. This is Yalak Emmett, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon.